I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for having us this evening and the Economic Development Committee for joining us for this discussion. So in front of you, you have a draft that we prepared of the regulations for the overlay that we discussed. And it covers the two zoning districts that are present within the Newtown Business Commons. So that's the LI and the OLI zoning districts. So tonight, basically the idea for this presentation is to just present some of the highlights that you'll find within the draft, and then at the end we can kind of answer some questions and have a discussion on some next steps. So first, here's just a quick agenda to kind of describe how we're framing the discussion around this overlay. So we'll begin by reminding everyone the area that's in question here, which is the overlay boundary. Next, we'll look at the uses that are currently present in the underlying zoning and what new uses we're proposing to add as a part of the overlay. We're then going to look at the area dimensional requirements and how they compare to the underlying and existing zoning. Then we'll get into some of the highlights from the development standards that are present in the draft. After that, I'll just show a quick illustration of what a potential development outcome might look like under these standards. And then finally, we'll just touch on a few areas that we saw as kind of requiring a little bit more discussion before we move forward and putting them into the draft. Okay. All right, so first, this is, again, as we've talked about, this is the boundary that we've considered for the overlay. So just as a reminder, it includes all the parcels that have frontage along the roads that are highlighted in pink. And so that would make all the parcels within those two underlying zoning districts included, except for those that are shaded in red here. So it's kind of the majority of parcels with the exception of those that you see there. All right, so on this next slide, you'll see a breakdown of all the uses that would be permitted within the overlay. So the uses that are highlighted in yellow here are the uses that have been added from what's currently permitted in the underlying zone. So just to kind of go through, starting with the uses that we've added as by right uses, we have, so the first is garden apartment, and I'll just put a pin in that because we're going to discuss that a little bit more shortly. And then recreational facility, retail shop, service business, financial establishment, eating place, specialty cultural shopping facility, home occupation, and dwelling in combination with a business. So those would be the ones that would be added by right.
Jeremy, would you prefer that we ask questions during it or at the end?
I think during the end, we might forget what we want to ask.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know me well.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, so what is not highlighted are existing uses in those two districts, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and highlighted means a new use that you're putting into those two districts
As a part of the overlay.
as only part of an overlay.
Correct,
Thank
yeah.
you, thank you.
I mean, the ones that aren't highlighted, a lot of them already exist.
No, that's what he said, they're existing.
Yeah, it is unhighlighted. Those are the permitted uses in the underlying zone.
Okay. And then later, if you took any out, you'll tell us that too.
Well, we haven't taken it yet.
Oh,
So
okay,
we're not
good to know.
changing. We're not changing the
Good.
underlying zoning.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. So next, for the uses that we've added that would be permitted by conditional approval, we've added community center, entertainment use, community shopping center, commercial conversion, tavern use, microbrewery use, art studio and art gallery, and then community theater. And uses that are permitted by special exception, there are no changes there. That's we're not adding any new uses by special exception. All right, so one of the more impactful changes probably from this overlay are the area dimensional requirements. So as you can see from the table here, the primary areas that we've made changes are in the yard requirements. So we've relaxed the yard requirements for front, side, and rear yard, down from 75 for front yard requirement. Now we've added a minimum and a maximum front yard of 10 and 25. For side yard, we bumped it down to 10, and then for rear yard to 20. And then the other thing that we've added for the area dimensional requirements is a requirement to incorporate public space as a percentage of the base site area, and that is proposed at 5% of the base site area. So the other area dimensional requirements that are related to minimum lot size, minimum lot width, impervious surface, and building height remain the same as in the underlying zoning. All right, so next I'll kind of run through some of the highlights from the development standards. So starting with a combination of uses we provided for. So we added language to permit both multiple principal uses within the same structure and multiple principal uses on separate structures on the same lot. So we also addressed residential density. So this is another area that I won't put a pin in until later when we can have a larger discussion about it. After that, we've addressed building design and layout. So we've written in provisions for things like how much space is permitted between buildings in an effort to create kind of a more compact, walkable environment. We've also added some architectural considerations as to building design for including facade treatment and screening of rooftop mechanical equipment and utility areas. So the next development standard we've addressed is streetscape design. So here we've encouraged streetscape improvements like uniform sidewalks, landscaping and street trees, lighting, benches, bike racks, wayfinding, signage, and appropriate access management. And again, with the idea being to encourage an environment that's more suitable for pedestrians. We're also encouraging enhancements to bus infrastructure for parcels that find frontage along the SEPTA Route 130 bus. We've also added provisions that address spaces and public amenities. So as I mentioned before, we did have a requirement that public space will be required at 5% of the base site area. And we made a note that that public space should be visible from the street and accessible to the public. And it can range in examples such as plazas, courtyards, pocket parks, outdoor meeting areas, that type of thing. We've also encouraged public amenities, so not just places for the public to gather, but also elements for the public to enjoy. So things like gateway features, focal features, benches, period lighting, trash cans, that type of thing. And then also as a part of this section, we did include a fee in lieu provision to the extent that some of these requirements are deemed impractical. So next, we added some provisions related to site design and layout. So this includes things like refuse storage, landscaping and lighting requirements. Next, I just want to mention the buffer requirements that we've added in here. So we mentioned, I think last time we were here, that the Commons does have neighboring residential communities, so we do want to remain mindful to those communities. So with that in mind, we proposed a couple buffer requirements in addition to the buffering requirements that are already present in the zoning. We're proposing a 25-foot buffer from residential lot lines that are adjacent to but not within the proposed overlay. And that's inclusive, again, of all other buffering and setback requirements. Second, we've proposed a building setback from residential lot lines that are adjacent to but not within the overlay. And that building setback is proposed at 1.5 times the building height. And then finally, just related to parking, we've added parking provisions that the parking should be located either to the rear or to the side of the building. And we want to encourage vehicular connections among different parking areas to the extent that it's feasible. We've added language to that effect. And then finally, we've added a provision to allow for on-street parking. All right, so this is just a quick illustration of what potential development outcome might look like. So you can see from the image, first and foremost, that the setback has been relaxed with the building located closer to the road to encourage more pedestrian activity. In this example, you can also see the building is a mixed-use structure with commercial on the ground floor and a couple floors of residential above. We've also added in some public space in the form of a little pocket park or outdoor eating area. And then finally, landscaping that's been integrated with the rest of the site. All right, so these are the areas that I just wanted to touch on for a little bit of additional discussion. So the first area is the question of how to provide a mechanism for allowing residential. So right now we've sort of shoehorned the garden apartment use as the chosen residential use type, which we felt was the best fit based on what was already in the zoning ordinance to put here. We did have language stating that where the garden apartment is proposed, it can only occupy the second and third floors, with the first floor of the building being a non-residential use. So that's one approach. Another approach that we had considered was creating an entirely new use. So there's no mixed-use structure, mixed-use building use within the zoning ordinance right now. So if we wanted to have a use that more directly, fit with what the township was looking for, then we could always create a brand new use with its own use regulations in the ordinance at large, and then probably it would make the most sense from our opinion to then go through jointure wide and see where it would be permitted. Which seems like a larger process, but permitting it only in this overlay, it seems like if we were to, now would be the time to do it, in other words, of looking at where else it would be permitted if we're going to introduce a brand new use.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you talking about only mixed use for residential, or with the possibility of an entirely residential building?
Yeah, so I think what we talked about last time was allowing for residential only when it was in combination with a non-residential use on the ground floor. So it wouldn't be, just an apartment structure.
Sounds like they would be buildings like where, along Sickle.
Right, with the retail on the bottom where Bernie Robbins is, and the
Yeah.
apartments on the top. Yeah. To me personally, I don't like the idea of an apartment building at all in there. I don't think it's something that we want to, I just feel that the commercial on the bottom and the residential on the top is more in with the rest of the township. I mean, I think garden apartments, what I see is a 6-story building.
Yeah. So
I mean, it is a business commons. It's always been that, and I understand the changes, but I don't know that we want to step into that.
Well, yeah, so I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, I don't think any of us want just flat out residential developments in the commons. But from an economic and a planning perspective, we did think that it made sense in order to have a customer base close by. If we're going to expand these uses to create retail, service, things like that, to have that customer base living right there and tax it, yeah, it does make sense from an economic and planning perspective.
I guess I have another question more about terminology. You have apartments, garden apartments, like it's something. Technically, it's a mixed-use structure. In the future, I guess we can gear concern about height. That would then tell us how many stories it can be. So we can start gearing that. Using a mixed-use structure, and I understand the idea of commercial at the first floor and residents above it. You could find a place where there's a mix in between there, and they become condos. Maybe there is some commercial for the second, and it does do things, and that part happens. in between the spaces, kind of like before the open, allows light to get in. Instead of thinking about a box, you think about one donut, right? With spaces that allow things to happen.
Right.
But that, we have to, I think, our thought process when we say things like, can we create law, I guess, or zoning, developer looks at it and says, okay, what am I going to do? And how am I going to look at it? I understand certain pieces, and we restrict by, like, stepping back a second, and say, 1.5 foot for vegetation, 1 by 5, well, where do you be? What happens if that developer ended up buying 3 lots?
Right.
Building a building here right now. Then that's going to be built. It's going to come back in about 5, 10 years, whenever it's done. Say, wait, look at where we are. We find ourselves when we create the zoning, we don't really understand the implications of it
Yeah.
as we create it. We're thinking about what's going to happen in the future, but we don't really know.
Right.
So I'd be very careful about using words like garden apartments or other things. If it's a mixed-use structure, it's a mixed-use structure.
Right,
Then we
so-
can limit what the uses are.
Sure.
Where the uses are located, placement and so on, right? From that.
And these are rentals apartments.
Creative use, sorry.
Yes,
I think that's what you're saying.
correct.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
these are rental properties, right?
Most likely, yeah.
But we can't restrict that,
Yeah,
right?
it's not- I don't
That's
think-
like, that's an ownership.
Yeah. Because a rental property doesn't generate any property taxes.
Yeah. But, so, yeah, your point is well taken though, because,
Well, they create another one.
No, it's not.
I still have a concern about that is there going to be enough demand for that much commercial to start getting into this? That's why I bring up that maybe allowing, you might not like it, I disagree, but I think the entire apartment building might be a solution at times because I think we're having a hard time with commercial. I mean, you've seen it now. A lot of towns have a lot of empty storefronts. So I'm not sure if we want to lock ourselves into something like that.
Unless they were service commercial, like a service business.
I don't think it matters what it is. At some point in time, you just end up with more service, commercial, call it what you want. How much can we support? And what is our vision going forward? I like the picture you had of that, but we could be 100 years before they knock down everything that's there and start filling that in and we get a whole different mode with it. I mean, I like the residential for the EIT on top of the property taxes that you were paying, so.
yeah.
Right now, none of the parcels are very big, so I think the density and stuff, it's gonna be a long time getting a lot much done.
Yeah, and so that might actually be a nice segue into the second topic for discussion here, which was the residential density. So that would be a provision that we included in here. Now, we, just from our conversations that we had with the development community, we're hearing that it's not making economic sense for them to do mixed-use projects with less than 100 to 150 units. So as an example, the Butler Square apartments, which is actually what this photo simulation is based off of, that's 117 units on 7 acres. And their ordinance permits up to 20 units an acre, so the 117.
Where is that?
New Britain Borough. Yeah.
Shelton Borough?
Is it Chalfont?
I think so.
Okay, sorry. And then, so their ordinance permits up to 20 units an acre, so this ends up just under that. And just for reference, the parcels that are in the comments generally range from about 2 to 6 acres, with a few upper outliers. But so that essentially what that means is that if you wanted to increase the viability of your pool of potential parcels that can be developed in order to get to that 100 to 150 unit threshold, you really have to up your permitted density to something closer to say 40 units an acre. But if on the other hand, you're okay limiting your pool of parcels that could be built out to that 100 to 150 unit threshold to something smaller, then you'd probably be okay with a lower density allowance, like something like 20 units an acre.
Can they manage impervious surface and parking, all that at higher density?
Can the developers?
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously a challenge. I mean, I think I'd have to look to, like this Butler Square Apartments is a good example. given what we know about it being on 7 acres and the parking that they allow. So we could kind of cite a couple, recent projects and see what their parking lot looks like compared to their ordinance requirements and impervious requirements.
Jeremy, I may have mentioned this before. I live right by that Butler Square Apartments, I'm a mile away, so I'm very familiar with it. That was an existing site that they renovated to make those apartments. And I caution using that to justify a higher density because it is across the block, across the street from the train station. So I think a lot of people want to live there because they don't have to take their car anywhere. I would like to see an example of a development where maybe it's along the bus route, like you're saying along here, rather than so close to the train station. I know Evan had used the other one that is in New Britain Borough across from Del Val, and that one again is next to a train station right at Del Val.
The Patriot Place or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know the name of it, and that's mixed use also.
Yeah.
But that's close to a train station also. So I'd like to see something, if you have it, that is maybe along a bus route like this one.
Okay, okay. We can definitely pull some of that towards the goal of coming up with what a reasonable density would be.
And I don't know how far.
What's that?
Or with adequate parking.
Right.
Right. I don't know how far we want to get into this, but I'd love to hear what the EDC has to say, because I know some of them are developers and would have a lot to know and tell us about uses too.
I volunteer. I promised I wasn't going to speak, but I'll let an actor roll. My name is Karen Miller, and I'm a developer since 1999 in the park, when it was called the Industrial Park. I'm the co-president of the Newtown Business Commons Association, and I'm also on the EDC. First, I have to applaud everyone for even entertaining this. I've been screaming some change for 20 years. I even was the one who got medical approved for someone that I was going to do in 2003 throughout the whole park. So all of you developers who have medical uses in the park and the taxes that we're, Newtown is benefiting from, you're welcome. Firstly, I'd like to know, again, I've been here since 1999, I've developed ground up, I've added on, I've probably paid for more side even our it's been paid for. So have you met with, I would love to see a meeting, an intense meeting with our board, not only the EDC, but the people like me who own buildings, have either tenants or, are actual users in the park. Because A, there's very few opportunities for ground, very few. If you'd like to buy ground, you wish to buy ground, in order to develop it, it's practically impossible to do something like a garden apartment, because you cannot, like you said, it has to be high density, because you cannot afford, no one's gonna buy ground for $7 million for a few acres, which is what it's become now, and be able to afford to build on it. I mean, when I got started, you were not allowed to park in the front. That was from Doug Terry's father, Jesse Terry, who created this park from the beginning. And Doug Terry recently told me a few years ago that that wore off. You had to have a brick building, and you could not do any parking in front. But in order to accommodate medical uses and all these other uses, and to come into this world today that we all live in, you had to change it up, and you had to have parking in the front. So finally, I didn't realize that I went in for variances. In the meantime, that rule supposedly wore off, according to what Doug told me, what was the original on the books. So to do away with front parking, would put people out of business. You would not even, maybe get cheaper ground, because you wouldn't be able to make it work.
Yeah.
The numbers have to work. I realize everyone thinks, oh, they're greedy. It's not about being greedy. It's what Newtown's a fabulous place. People want to be here because of the proximity. If we could work on together with the people like me and the other business owners who have been around for a really long time, and see what we know, and our board especially, we've been hearing about expanding the sidewalks forever. Well, we got that ball rolling, and thankfully, the politicians got involved, and we were able to get the $800,000 grant, was it, Mary?
Yes.
So we'll get sidewalks down. Now, I had to pay for it as a developer because it's part of my land development. But if my neighbor who doesn't really take care of their property and doesn't have a need to do land development, they're gonna get a free sidewalk. People still walk in the street, by the way, and they're perfectly good sidewalks. I'm always blown away by that. But I really think that we need to start, like, I think a little bit over, because some of the proposed things and some of the proposed areas to put them in are never gonna happen because they just don't make sense. And we only know that because we've been here forever, you know? So I really think we need to, like, whittle this down to people who, I'm not saying that you guys don't know, you're sitting here, you know, every month giving all your time, but the heart of the matter is the people who, I'm a broker, I'm a developer, I'm there, my office is in the park, I'm there every single day. I think we have a lot more people, like, in my position, that if we could get them to show up at a meeting, which I'll make personal phone calls and get them to show up, and say, this is what we're looking for, because this is what everyone's telling us, this is what they need. I developed a corner property. It's taken me, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. Finally got my last lease. It took that long. And I was told that I couldn't have, don't dare think about a drive-through of coffee or anything like that, and food. Well, what more do we need in the park than a quick, there's a lot of people who have 30-minute lunches. We've talked about it in our meetings for years and years and years. A quick, you know, drive-through with a little quick sandwich and a coffee would have been fabulous. But we weren't allowed to do it. I mean, we've got one restaurant, you know, and what we need is during the day. I know the developer from what you showed, and I know the one across from Del Valle. There's an organic grocery store that you would think that everyone from Doylestown would be, they're out of business.
I know.
They are already closed down. And it's the same business that's in Carousel, which broke my heart. They just didn't have the business. Retail is not the way anymore. Drive by one of the latest neighborhoods, everybody, these youngins, I'll call them, and even old people like me, they have boxes, they're getting everything delivered. I hate to say it, but I do think we do need some type of service businesses, but I'm not looking to build, you know, $5 grand for $7 million and put another $8 million in by the time you're done with everything and have empty stores.
What are
It's
you
not
looking
good.
to build? What are some uses that would fit in the industrial commons, in your opinion?
Something quick to eat, a little drive-through
So restaurant.
would have been the perfect thing.
All right, so then we have to work on how do we stop every single restaurant in the world from getting into the commons?
No, that's what's been
Every time.
happening for the 20 years that I've been here.
Right.
I mean, we weren't, they finally let the hotel, we didn't have a hotel. I would have to help my tenants find places to stay. I mean, you know how long that hotel took?
Right.
I mean, it was excruciating. The signage, you know, people went from big manufacturing buildings to cutting them up because that's what people wanted. And then you weren't allowed anything more than a sign this big. Well, what do you think people are doing? They're stopping in the street trying to see the little, you know, signage. It's things like that. Like, we all know it. We sit there and talk about it. For the last 20 years, we've talked about it at our, you know, our meetings of people actually in the business commons. Jerry used to be a part of that.
So restaurants, what else?
Like the brewery.
Brewery use.
That was a great thing. I mean, they're doing really well and people love it. People would call our board and say, why don't you make the sidewalk from the townhouses across the street so that we can get to the brewery?
Yep.
And now they can do it. Except the brewery doesn't have one because that guy didn't have to do land development. He rents there. It's not him, it's the owner. But they walk in a little bit of grass, they get there.
Okay.
They also have food trucks.
And I'd like to know, yeah, they do. Well, because probably they're not allowed to have food.
True.
That's right.
Only on weekends.
Right.
No, they get food trucks. They have food trucks all the time. 5% of public space. Like, we don't have, I think Newtown has a plethora of parks and trails and I think that's something.
What's
to
the
look for.
pizza place on the corner?
Francesca's?
No.
Oh.
In the township, when you come over Washington.
Meglio's.
Meglio's, thank you.
Yeah.
Meglio's has like a little cutout area
Right,
with
right.
slate and
Which
brick
makes
and
sense
bike
there.
racks.
I mean, I walk there all
That
the
was
time.
a public place that was required by
Okay,
the ordinance.
right, okay. So I pay plenty of fee in lieu of, but I don't really think that who's maintaining it?
Meglio's is supposed to.
Okay. So if you start think about practically speaking, you've got snow, I have a gigantic sidewalk on that corner. We have to make sure that that's clear. Even if no one's gonna walk on it, it has to be clear in the winter. If there's trash cans out there, I don't have a maintenance staff. I'm gonna have to go out and take up the trash. Like, like practically speaking, I think all that works in a borough setting, even though it's township, McLear's, that's township, it feels like the borough. It blends in with the borough. We're sort of not like that. I don't think, unless the township wants to designate, I mean, I don't want to take anyone's property by eminent domain, I'll never, be for that, but I just don't think it's necessary. I mean,
So the public space will be gone before.
I'm sorry.
Correct.
he said
Correct.
5%.
You're adding public space to the ordinance requirement.
Yes, that would be new.
Existing doesn't have to go back and carve out.
No, unless they do a land development, a redevelopment of that property.
Over an empty building.
Right.
And I think that like where there's not a lot of traffic past 5 or 6 o'clock, unless it's like the brewery or the live or dance or something like that, it's kind of empty there. And then I kind of feel like then you start seeing kids hanging because they know that's a spot. I think that's a little slippery slope too that I don't think is really necessary in the business commons.
Yeah.
From my opinion, again, living here every day for 20 years.
Well, I think part of that was kind of the genesis of having like some type of residential there, so that you have more people.
Well, then they
actually-
should be required. They should obviously, and people, like, a developer would want that. They have
Right.
nice public little areas for people.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
For residential.
Yeah.
But Penn's Trail to have, I think can you go back to that slide where it shows the
map.
color code?
You're talking about the map of
The map, yeah. It's the, not available. There you go.
yeah.
So it's the paper purple line.
So it would be all the parcels that front along the pink or purple line. So the parcels that are,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. The parcels that are shaded in red are excluded from the overlay because they don't have frontage along.
Well, that's the sewerage, right. I mean, a lot of these parcels there are very few opportunities in there, in that pinky purple, for residential.
Based
Well,
on-
unless you do redevelopment, you
If you're
take
tearing
some of
it
those,
down, right.
tear it down, or you
Yeah.
take one of those existing vacant buildings and then make it into apartments.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of what we wanted to at least provide the opportunity for.
I just think that Penn's Trail is just such a highly traveled area that may not be the best idea.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have one more question for you. I know you said that you want parking in the front, and I'm guessing
necessary.
that's to allow enough parking for the business?
It's allowing enough parking according to what the
Correct.
township regulations say you have to have. And I can tell you, all my buildings are all overparked.
But if you go to that slide, Jerry, where you said area and dimensional requirements,
Yeah.
so you see what he's doing with the front yard setback, where it used to be 75 feet from the right-of-way line is where you put your building. He's moving the building all the way up closer to the street, so you have 65 to 45 more feet that you could park in the back.
In the back.
Right.
I think part of this is trying to change the look. It's
Exactly,
actually
yeah.
being a spread out area, which now just looks, I'm personally against the parking in front of it, it makes them look not nice, because all you see is cars in front of buildings, where before you had nice lawns and things like that. Now you're just a regular shopping center situations, like they're
It's
trying to
even not a
make it.
shopping center. We're.
But it's that look,
Yeah.
where it's office, whatever, it's
Right.
just this run of the mill where Newtown used to be very distinctive with all brick buildings and grass yards and stuff in the front. But it
You
was
mean in
more-
the business complex
It was
itself?
much more of an industrial look, so they could control industrial stuff in the back, so I get the change, but I think we're trying to make a much more pleasant appearance by
And
moving
you-
buildings out to the street.
Right,
And
sure.
plenty of parking behind them and easy access, so I think it's a whole different look, at least in my mind, that they're going for, which I'm in favor of what I've seen so far. I'm concerned about a few of the side yards and setbacks and things, but
And if you like that, then I think 10 feet might be two minimum of a setback. If you want to do the streetscape that you have in the back of your ordinance to fit all of those things in, like the trees and the sidewalk, and I like your larger sidewalk Where the ordinance right now says 5-foot wide sidewalk, that looks to be at least 10 feet wide. And I like that idea. So you need more of a setback, more room to plant larger street trees too. I'm thinking of the atrium on Terry Drive too. You hardly even see the buildings in the back.
Right.
They're one-story buildings though, and they have well-established trees in the front. And I think that first building is pretty close to Terry Drive too.
Yeah.
Jeremy, can I ask a stupid question? It goes back to the, it goes back to the map. I never understood the that you weren't going to do anything in the red zone.
The red shaded parcels?
Yeah,
Those are just the parcels that don't have frontage along the corridors that we're using to define the overlay.
So the corridors are something you mentioned with the bus routes?
Yeah, so the bus route, it's a little hard to see, but you see the blue dotted line, that's the bus route. So,
It goes in front of the hotel.
Right.
And then it goes out, Cherry Drive.
But aren't those red areas closer to where there's already residential outside of that zone?
Some of them are.
some of them are, and that, honestly, that was part of the reason why they're kind of excluded. Well, I mean,
Why
I
would
guess-
that be part of the reason why they were excluded? Because when I drive by there, it looks very dead. There's nothing happening in there. It looks like there's a lot of empty space there.
The areas in red you're talking
Yeah, I think, if I'm reading the map
I have another question.
correctly.
Have you looked into, because this was another big thing, part of our board was one of the, was the whole bus thing, and we put in, I think the only bus shelter, right, which is on,
It's on,
no, that's on Pheasant Run,
Right.
across from the hotel.
Yeah.
We found that at one point that the buses went away. They didn't have enough people on the bus.
during COVID.
No,
No, the
10 years
bus
ago.
still runs, I think
It
it's
still
talking
runs,
about
are
the
there-
rush bus, that stopped.
Okay. So
That
do we
was
know,
the-
can we get from SEPTA how many people?
We can try to find it out.
But that goes up to the college from
Yeah,
down by
and then
Woodland
into
Road. I
town,
think
into
it,
the borough.
Goes up to Lincoln.
Goes through the
yeah,
shopping
it's like it
center.
goes
I'm just
through-
curious because again, I don't see it that often and I don't see.
Right.
The
So,
buses, I think every time I've ever seen that bus, the SEPTA bus,
Yeah.
it's empty.
It's empty, that's, yeah.
yeah, I mean, the other thing was we were gonna talk about was, if we were to try to locate some residential here, it might be a desired place for, folks.
They could get to Woodburn
Yeah,
train?
Exactly, yeah, they could get to the community college, they could get into the borough, they could, it would be almost, it would be an area that could potentially be more affordable, for folks.
Well, that's not gonna happen.
Well, I mean.
Not what it costs to develop it, it just won't.
I agree with Warren. I'd like to see something looking more vibrant. The SEPTA issue is of some concern to me because I think that we ought to be able to get more service there. You don't have the ridership right now, but you don't have the ridership because you don't have the infrastructure there. And it seems to me, you're pretty close to relatively close to the Woodburn Way Station, just a shuttle bus when you back and forth. We're halfway between Penn and Princeton. That's gotta be worth something.
Well, we have a shuttle bus.
Here's the flop house, and people that get up there and walk down Barclay to the senior homes there that work there and walk over to, Chandler Home. There are people who take that bus to work.
There are riders, and I see a lot of people taking them to the community college. I see people who work in the cafes getting on the bus. But what stopped was the shuttle bus. The, SEPTA had a rush
Right, the
bus.
rest of us.
And it went to certain businesses that subscribed. And I don't think there was even a charge to the business. But it was free to get people to ride the train to work. And then they had lost all the ridership, and that was about 10 years ago.
So it's a 600 series for SEPTA. And they service business, industrial, comments like
they had diesel buses.
I'm sorry, Mary?
They were diesel buses. And then they got an electric one, and I know they run in Doylestown to,
Is that something that you could get from maybe DVRPC, the ridership, or
Yeah,
SEPTA? That's
I
something?
can-
I think even SEPTA, right?
Yeah, you can set, I'll talk to our transportation department and see if they can access it.
I guess I'm gonna have to say why you have a process around 130 buses. Certainly. What's the issue here?
I don't think we have an issue, we're just discussing the route that the bus takes and when it comes, when it goes into the commons, right?
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning of this, we had seen that, we looked at the 130 bus as an asset for a reason to locate residential.
So my point is, I don't think that is an asset to why you should locate residential along that bus route. I mean, people can't walk 3 blocks from the red zone to the pink zone. I don't get it. You know, if there's not enough space in the pink zone, that's what I've heard from Karen. And so, but I'm kind of in favor if there was some residential use there.
well, wasn't the thinking that if there was residential use, that the residents could take the bus to the train to go to work? Not the other way around.
Right.
That it would provide the residents transportation to wherever it was that they worked outside of the commons.
Right, yeah.
So that would, I don't want to sound horrible, I do know, but that would imply that it would have to be not so expensive. Because it would be people that don't have a car.
You mean the residential uses?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then Karen's saying that
And
for
she
the
doesn't
price of
think
the
it's
property
viable because
is
it's
not
yeah,
right.
that's another
Rental
night.
is
One thing that I think has been a trend that I think we've sort of seen in different publications is that sort of younger generations now that are, getting out of college or getting out of school, working, they tend to want to live in places where they can walk and where they can use public transportation. That sort of does seem to be a trend. The idea does sort of blend into that.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to proceed, keep going?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, that's pretty much all I add. There was, I think, one more bullet point on the final slide for discussion. We talked about the residential density. I'm sure we'll have more conversation about that. The design guidelines, that was the only other thing that I just wanted to mention, that we've done that in the past, would be kind of like an additional tool for creating greater detail around some of the amenities and things like that. So as an example, it would be like, rather than just recommending having benches and bike racks, it might provide illustrations of those bike racks and benches. And then what we've seen in the past is the design guidelines are typically made part of a salvo so that they become waiverable and therefore more, it creates more flexibility for both the township and the developer.
Okay, I have a question. Could you speak a little bit about what would be the advantage, I know from a business perspective, the advantage to being a by right use, but the township seems to want to have its finger in every pie, so eating place, retail, shouldn't they be by conditional use? Would there be any?
Am I right that if they're by conditional use, then they can more regulate, if it's in the ordinance, the hours, the deliveries and those type of things?
Yeah.
Whereas by right, then here I am.
Right.
Well, I think the conditional use is good because we do see.
That's what I heard there. All my years here, they all want to talk about when are you going to open, when are you going to close. That doesn't sound good.
And we always try to work with applicants on conditional
We
uses.
do, but if it's by right,
Yeah, we cut it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
We potentially decided to make everything in the Newtown Shopping Center conditional use.
yeah,
recently went to that control. Didn't always work, but it certainly gave us a heads up and a Bible to people who were coming in to start their businesses.
I'm just thinking if we're giving the planning commission guidance, this is something that we always seem to have an issue with. Why can they do that whenever they want? Because it's their right.
I think we do it more planning conditionally as really possible.
So out of what's listed here, would any of these that we added as by right?
The whole retail shop and service business